softcovers I have there, we have a new edition, and it has an introduction I wrote to the new Sideways hardcover, and it's like a 13,000 word forward. I mean, it's long. It's almost like a novella, and it really outlines and goes into the story of everything that led up to the making of it. And I've told this story many times, but you know, actually wrote and directed 2 independent feature films in the 80s, and took 8 years out of my life with my ex-wife, who now teaches at NYU, and she has an Academy Award for a short film I wrote that she made at the AFI that won in 2000, which was pretty cool. And you know, our second film didn't fare well at the box office, and so we kind of amicably parted company. In fact, that's her character there. She hates the actress they cast for her or whatever. But I don't know why. I mean, she did seem to be a perfect job. I hate her, you know. But you know, I actually started coming up here to play golf, and it's all in this forward area, because I needed to get away, and I used to be pretty good at golf. I didn't come up, I didn't know there was wine, and I was telling somebody earlier, so this is sounding redundant, I've told this story for a amount of time, and it's really detailed in this forward. I mean, everything that led up to the making of it, and you get a real insight into my writing process. So I didn't come up here to write a book. I came up just to play golf. I mean, initially, because LA, it's a drag. You know, it's expensive, and if you're not a member of a private country club, you know, it's just slow and whatever. So I started coming up to Sandpiper in Santa Barbara, which was inexpensive in the late 80s, you know, and everyone kept saying, go to La Prisma, go to La Prisma. So I finally went over the hill one day, and I did, and I fell in love with it. But I just came up to play golf. It was a gorgeous golf course by Lompoc. And then I started staying overnight, because might as well get in 2 rounds. It's a fucking long drive, and for me. And so I'm a creature of habit. So I'd go over to the Windmill Inn. It's $29.95. I never stayed anyplace else. I always stayed at the Mill Inn. That was it. $29.99. And I was broke. I mean, my life was, and when that second film bombed, I was nowhere. And then I had to have a place to eat. And I just go to the nearest place. I used to go to AJ Spurs. You know, everyone said, you got to go to the Hitching Post. Go to the Hitching Post. And I said, no, I'm happy here. This is fine. You know, I wasn't really into wine. I didn't even know it was a wine region. I really didn't. And this was in 91. So, and I'll cut to the chase here. So finally one day I did go into the Hitching Post. It looked like a biker bar to me. It looked dangerous. You know, like if you just looked at somebody the wrong way and they'd get knifed. And you know, and I'd sit at the bar, be nobody at the bar midweek. I only come up midweek, never came up on weekends, because I could just get away. And like literally for $150, I could play golf. It's $25. And it's $29.99 to stay at the Windmill Inn, and I'd have a burger and a couple glasses of Pinot, and I thought, wow. And I'd started going to wine tastings at a little place in Santa Monica on Saturday. I was just so lucky. For $4 you could really get ripped there, and I just fell in love with Pinot Noir, honestly. And so I came up and I started meeting some people at the Hitching Post, and they were winemakers, and I thought, oh my God. So I started coming out and started going wine tasting, which was free back then, and I just fell in love with the area. I thought it was really beautiful, and I started bringing friends up. You know, if I was dating someone, I'd bring them up or whatever, especially if they were paying, and they just fell in love with it. It's somewhat unchanged, except for Los Olivos, which is now a shameless red light district of tasting rooms. But the countryside really hasn't changed much, because they have strict zoning laws or whatever. But cutting to the chase, maybe something was building inside me all along. But I didn't come up and say, oh, I'm researching a novel, I'm researching a book. And I came up once in '96, I'll never forget it, with my friend Roy Gittins. He was an electrician on films. And he's just like the Jack character. He's big, he's extrovert, he's the light of the party. He was catnip to women back then, not now. And we were going from tasting room to tasting room. And I was just cracking him up. I can really make that guy laugh. And he's got a great laugh. And at one point I sat down and said, Rex, you should write this as a screenplay. So I went, because I was mostly a screenwriter and a filmmaker. I was not a novelist. And I wrote as a screenplay and called it Two Guys on Wine, but it didn't work. And I literally, it so didn't work I didn't show it to my agents. I don't know what was wrong with it, just didn't work. And then I was writing a short story. I was totally broke. I was desperate. I've said to many people, many interviews, you know, if I could have afforded a gun, I would have shot myself. But so I was writing a short story about these wine tastings at this little wine store in Santa Monica. And there were about 10 or 12 of us, and there were a bunch of snobs, really, there. And they I learned a lot about wine through a kind of a hazing process, you know, but, and hazing in two different meanings of the word. And I wrote it in first person from the standpoint of a guy named Miles, that short story. And about Miles goes this wine tasting, and it kind of degenerates into a brawl. And for those of you who've read the novel Sideways, it opens at Epicurus in Santa Monica. I live very close there now. It's now defunct. For 10 years been defunct. And it degenerates into a brawl. And I got to the end of it. I meant it just to be a short story. And I said, holy shit, I've got the screenplay as a novel. Jack will come in, he'll make an introduction and sort of rescue Miles from this brawl that has taken place over an issue over some high-end wine or something. I can't remember what it was. It's a funny scene, really is. And I'll never forget it. I just stood up from my desk and I said, oh my God. Because I'd already done the screenplay, I knew this was a wedding, whatever, I saw the whole thing. And I don't write, so now I'm drawing on all this experience. I've got my friend Roy, who's the Jack character. I'm the Miles character. He's not an 8th grade school teacher in the novel. He's an out-of-work screenwriter like I was, trying to just get a job or anything. And I wrote it in 9 weeks at that point. But people ask me how long it took me to write Sideways. My answer is always the same. It took me 9 weeks, but it really took me 10 years. Because that was in 98, 99. And then the story gets longer, and it's all in that forward. I'm not trying to get you to buy the book or anything, but it's all in there. And so there's a lot that happened after that. But, I draw from real life. I've always drawn from a very personal side. So this is a very, very personal movie to me. I mean, the divorce thing, unable. I'd written a novel before Sideways. It's my first novel called La Prisma. It was a mystery novel. And it was really a good novel, and it got me a really good agent, literary agent. I didn't have an agent. Prior to that, in 90, I went through a divorce. My mother had a massive stroke, not all in chronological order. My younger brother brought her home and fleeced her of about $400,000 in 2 years, and I had to take over her care. So that was happening. And I was having massive panic attacks, and I was just going through a lot of problems in the 90s and just trying to hold on to something. And I just threw it all in, all of that stuff. Miles' panic attacks, the divorce, finding out that his wife, it gets compressed and it gets fictionalized, but finding out, like you saw at the end, that his wife is not only remarried, which she's kind of accepted, but now she's pregnant. Now you know it's over. Emotionally, I know it sounds funny, but, and I found all this stuff, I found this stuff out, and prior to writing this novel, La Prisma, a mystery novel, that novel had 100 rejection letters, but they were nice rejection letters. Sideways had 100 rejection letters in 3 separate submissions, and they were not nice. They were nasty. And if La Prisma had been published, and I won't bore you with it, but it's about an older semi-retired private eye and a screenwriter burned out who slowly matriculates as a private eye under his aegis. Had that been published, there would never have been a Sideways, because they always contract for more when you do a mystery series. They would want 2 or 3 more in the series. I never would have written it. That was my dream. I was just going to be a mystery writer. I was going to move up here. I thought it was perfect. No one had done the San Ynez Valley from a mystery, to my knowledge. And obviously, Ross McDonald and the horrible Sue Grafton did Santa Barbara, and others have done, obviously, Dashiell Hammett, San Francisco, and many other cities. Raymond Chandler, L.A., of course, But I was going to be the guy, because it was perfect. You had wealth, and you had kind of lower middle class. That's the great con, and it didn't get published. So all that stuff is thrown in there. It's all me. It's just thrown in there. But it was finding the first-person voice of Miles that made the difference, because a screenplay is written willy-nilly in third person. He walked into the room, he did this, and it was like seeing the story from the inside out. And also in a novel, unlike a screenplay, you've kind of got to invent more, just to justify calling it a novel. And to me, I knew they were going to make it to the wedding. I knew Miles had all this baggage. I knew and I knew who Jack was. I knew the locations now. I'd been to them many times, you know. And that's a real, you know, I've talked to writers before. Having that sense of verisimilitude is a word I use a lot, which is a ring of truth where, you know, I try not to read screenplays because they're pretty boring, but most screenplays, the problem with them is that the characters just aren't real. They're just one-dimensional. It's like nobody's met a cop or nobody's met a, I don't know, a winemaker or whatever. I like it. So there's a lot of verisimilitude in this movie, which really honored my novel. It's a very faithful adaptation of my novel. I mean, for one thing, the novel's written in first person from the standpoint of Miles. So you can't go where Miles doesn't go. You'd be breaking all literary rules, of course. In the movie, you could. You can go off with Jack. You can do whatever you want. Go off with anybody, but he doesn't. You just saw the movie now. Miles is in every single scene of this movie. Think about it. He never goes off with Jack and Sandra Oh, ever. Miles is in every single scene of the movie. So he, without benefit of voiceover, he basically shot the film in first person. The chapter structure of the novel is Saturday, Sunday, Monday, but it has like little subheadings like uncorked or so, I don't know. There's different ones, I forget now. He dropped those, but he kept the chapter structure of the novel in the movie. I mean, he's literally filmed the novel, you know. So I don't remember what your question was.
Yeah.